All right, you gloriously miserable accursed. It's Friday. My God, not a moment too soon, right, Jordan?
Right. Poor Jordan.
We're back. Your intrepid correspondents on the Ontario election campaign. Myself, David Herle, here with Deb Hutton, Jordan Leichnitz, and Scott Reid. We'll talk a little bit about yesterday on the campaign trail. We've got new polling data that shows a little bit of movement, nothing significant, but hell, we'll take it and we'll talk about it. And then switch to the federal scene where the polls are changing and maybe things are changing. We'll talk about that a little bit too. Let's start with today's polling. Today's Relay Strategies polling is brought to you by Enbridge Gas, reliable, affordable gas to heat your homes and power our economy. So, you know, I could be making a mountain out of a molehill, so I'm not making a mountain. There's actually not much happening here, and let's be clear, vote intention is flat relatively to where we started. So today, vote intention is 49 PC Ford, 25% Crombie Liberal, and 17% Stiles NDP. I guess what I saw in the overnights that's kind of interesting is certainly it appears that the Conservatives have at a minimum peaked, and Ford is off of his peaks on most of the attribute questions. Not off by much, but just off by a little bit. But the more significant things that I saw in the data were, first of all, that the surge that we saw in importance on dealing with Trump and tariffs is receding. And those points are going right back to affordability, not to healthcare, not to education. They're going right back to affordability. And the second thing is that and Jordan, I'm sorry, I may have given you guys, I give you a bum steer. I think I read my data tables wrong last night. The Liberals have made a little bit of a move on two fronts. So if I can just find this here.
Take your time, David.
I'm taking my time. It's not important. It's live.
David, did you give me false hope last night? Because
I may have.
I'm very sensitive to that as a New Democrat.
On best to deal with the cost of living, the Conservatives peaked out in our tracking at 51% compared to 23% for the Liberals and 27% for the NDP. And as of last night, those numbers were 45 Conservative. Best to deal with cost of living, 28% NDP and 28 Liberals. So the Liberals up 5 points and the Conservatives down 6 points on best to deal with cost of living over the course of our tracking. And on helping people like you, at their peak, the Conservatives were at 44 on that point. The NDP were at 32 and the Liberals were at 25. And as of last night, the Conservatives were at 40. The NDP were at 31 and the Liberals were at 29. So they'd moved up 4 points and the Conservatives have lost 4 points on helping people like you.
Now,
so that's
who's you?
Well, it isn't you.
It's not you.
Does Kyla
really.
describe you? Like, is it, did they show like a little infographic of me hunched over a bar with a double jack and crying as I look at my phone?
Yeah. Does he care about people like you? And they've decided no. So,
okay, he's justified in that.
Having said all that about the polling, I guess the thing that caught my attention, and I have a point of view about this, but I'd like to hear others first. And maybe Jordan, will start with you. Is the Liberal bus? The numbers on the Liberal bus. So apparently, the numbers on the Liberal bus of people that died waiting for surgery is incorrect by a factor. And it's only correct if you add in the people that died waiting for diagnostic services as well as surgery. So the bus says this is the number of people that died waiting for surgery, and that is incorrect. And they appeared caught a little bit by surprise by that.
Yeah.
So what's your take on it, Jordan?
Well, so I first I'm gonna self-disclose a fuck up I oversaw when I was working in the leader's office, because it immediately flashed me back to that. There was a time where the NDP wanted to put out billboards showcasing some of the firearms that would become unregistered with the death of the firearms registry. And anyway, anyone who knows anything about firearms and registration is very, very.
I'm having PTSD right now as you fucking talk about it.
Complicated. Yeah. Sorry, I apologize to all the liberals listening.
Western liberals, fucking liberals, right?
Any that might be left after this episode. So anyway, it's complicated because you can have a type of firearm, but some variants might fall into one category and some variants might fall into another. Anyways, at the time I was a researcher, and our comms person said, is this type of firearm going to be unrestricted? And he gave a category. And I said, broadly, yes. Anyway, that was, bless the comms folks, because that was enough for them. They went out and they did these billboards. And I opened it the next day and I saw it in the Globe and Mail. And it was the wrong one on the billboard. They picked the wrong picture. Yeah. So anyway, I sort of had a flashback to that because it must have been the same yawning sense of horror that the staff had when they realized that there's a problem with this number. And this is like the danger of when you use kind of a factoid like that and you're really making it core to your visual, to a campaign or to like, an ad campaign or a visual piece like that. You have got to be so sure about the source for it because people are going to fact check something that's rolling up on the side of your bus every day. And I think the challenge with a figure like this, like not to nerd out too much, but it's also like, yes, the number is large, but, we don't know, like, are those people who sort of died of other issues or are they, yes. We don't, it's not necessarily causal, right? So there's a lot of ways that we can show that the Ontario healthcare system is failing people. You could look at ER shutdowns, wait times, family doctors, and those are things that actually would probably be a little bit easier to nail down in terms of having something that's like ironclad and fact checked. So I guess my first reaction was really like just pure professional empathy for the whoever the researcher was who had dug that up and was now responsible for it. But yeah, I mean, it's a problem, right? Because now the bus that is, and like, I mean, you can rewrap it, but that's not a cheap proposition, is the backdrop to all of their announcements is like kind of a wrong and not factual bus. It's not a good look. It's just one more of the errors in the unforced errors of the unforced error Bonnie Crombie campaign.
There you go, ending with a hard slider on the inside.
Come on. Okay, first of all, don't tell me, oh my God, I got the wrong stat or the wrong paragraph. And this is your traumatic campaign story. Try going on national television and saying beer and popcorn, being a lightning rod for hate for 4 solid days in a row, not being able to move on the street without having people walk up to you and spit in your face. Okay. So give me your, oh, Jesus, I may have cited things, the wrong IBID. Second of all,
you left out the enduring 25 years of life that has.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I like, we still mock you for it. So I mean, it's
mock. I get it, and I'm not shitting you. I get it 3 times a week. I'm not kidding.
No.
And now
it's part of our
Canadiana. Because I've given it new life. But a real prideful moment. But here's the thing:
a heritage moment. Anthony Wilson Smith should make a heritage moment out of it.
Yeah, that would be grateful. I've had so much fun talking about.
I mean, you are bringing people together across a spectrum, so there's that.
No, I know. I rally folks in their mutual dislike of me. This, you know what? Sorry, you're playing Twinkie politics here, Jordan. And if 11,000, it includes diagnostic as well as surgeries. Okay, fine. Like my response if I was on the Liberal campaign would be, well, you know what? If we included those who actually are, in one of these broken retirement homes that have been operating under the provincial regulation, then we could crack that number up to 200,000. Like, to me, if you're having people argue about how many people are dying and which category of death they belong to, then you are actually getting another story on healthcare and its faltering, failing efforts here in Ontario. So as controversies, yes, you want to be accurate, but as controversies go, this is like This is a good controversy for the Liberals. And frankly, they had their first clean day of the campaign yesterday. Crombie actually talked about healthcare, got the premier to react on healthcare, got pretty much straight across the board coverage about healthcare yesterday. So, my message would be do more of what you did yesterday. Find creative hooks to talk about the same thing. Give me families that have had terrible stories and experiences. It's not like they're hard to find. I have had 2 in the past month. So, I think it was a pretty good day for the Liberals. Yeah, I don't think it's going to necessarily turn the tide, but if they could have 3-4 days like this in a row, that would be helpful, especially with some of these underlying numbers. Last thing I would say, the tour has not been good. We've talked about it for the Liberals. Yesterday was the best looking event they put on. Like the visual actually looked like a professional produced campaign event.
Well,
Deb,
maybe
Shirley Scott's right, Deb, that if the rest of the campaign was dominated by a fight about just how many thousands of Ontarians were dying because of the healthcare system, waiting for the healthcare system, that would be not in the Conservatives' interest.
Yeah, but I don't buy that. I will concede Scott's point that the Liberals got their message out. It was on healthcare. She had a 4-point plan and she penetrated the media. That I will concede. But in terms of the bus thing, I mean, all you have to do is say, here's what the numbers are, and here's why we're using these numbers. I mean, you can use any number you want, but they didn't even seem ready to defend it. And that was the part that sort of, I said, how bad is this campaign? And yes, her visuals were fine yesterday, but what about the piano and reading the text that she had never read before?
You did that once. You don't get to go back to that well. You can't make that day 2 podcast material.
Okay, well then we can go back to when her hat flew off in the middle of saying hats
you
are
did
stupid
that
in a
already
campaign.
Too. Come on, you're just playing the hits.
Do you want me to keep going with the hits? Because I got a lot of them. Like, I mean, it's been a terrible, terrible campaign, and maybe they're hitting dry pavement. Maybe we'll see a shift. But the number isn't so much good news that they're talking about the number. The number, in my mind, signifies that they don't know what they're doing, that it's not a well-run campaign, and that she is not, and we know this is her first big campaign, but she is a seasoned politician. She's been around every level of government. She should know what she's doing.
Can I stick with you, Deb, and just ask you, moving off this and going on to a little broader thing, which is
I was having fun with this, though.
I know you were, but you were running out of examples of the shittiness of the Liberal campaign, so I thought I'd take you off the hook.
Which matter less to people than 11,000 dead Ontarians, I'd say, on balance.
What I'm wondering a little bit watching this, so I see the steam coming out of the tariff issue again as we get away from the Trump crisis of last weekend, and I see that reporters aren't really asking Ford about the tariff issue anymore at the avails. And I wonder whether this campaign isn't moving out of the pretty tight frame it started in and just into drift. I wonder if this campaign just sort of drifting a little bit away from the frame that the Conservatives wanted on it. What do you think?
So he heads to Washington Monday. This is Friday. Yeah. And I really don't think maybe there's a lull here for a day or two. But what I see if you're watching things visually is a guy in his element. He's surrounded by workers. There's lots of work boots. There's lots of hard hats. There's people that are really happy to be with them that are average Joe workers. And he's talking about Protect Ontario. So is it a new message? No, but that's a good thing in a campaign. And I do think next week in Washington will be, right on message for them. And to a certain extent, this campaign for the Conservatives is about just getting to the end as quickly as possible, right, and not allowing the other 3 parties to take up too much oxygen. And with the exception of yesterday, by the way, Marit's message, Jordan, I'll say something nice on rent control, as much as it makes me, dig in my heels and vote Conservative even more, at least was a clean message for her as well, and presumably on her base.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something about rent controls, by the way. They're fucking popular.
Yeah,
they're fucking popular, right? And so that
it's such an easy, politically, in terms of an affordability policy, a housing policy. I think it's a really solid one symbolically, for sure, for the party.
Yeah.
You know, David, I think I just want to add Deb's point is so important. He is in Washington next week, and we don't know what will happen 2 days from now from Trump. We don't know if one of these federal ministers being in Washington produces some sort of explosive intervention from an administration official who says, listen, we're going to come back and cut your genitals off in 3 weeks. So like, you just don't know. So if there's a glimmer of an opening for people who are not dug forward, if it feels like a campaign shifting way, the worry has to be that it can always shift back. But I've written a piece for the Star tomorrow, a big exciting thing called a newspaper that still exists on the margins of society. And my advice is what we say every day, right? Which is, for the Liberals, you got to stick on affordability and healthcare. It's going to be tempting. It's going to be gut-wrenchingly tempting to try to move into the news cycle, especially with the Wednesday or with the Monday meetings coming up, to go back to tariffs. But if you do, you lose. This slight momentum that you're showing, David, and it's an overstatement to say momentum. Like, you got to turn yesterday, if you're the Liberal campaign, into 4 days, and you got to hope that Washington doesn't eclipse all of next week. But to go into tariffs would be the reward forward. I
do wonder, like, just the flip side to Scott's coin there, if nothing happens next week on the Trump and tariff stuff, and he goes down to Washington, is that also potentially a vulnerability? Like, he's leaving the province in the middle of a campaign. He's avoiding questions about issues here in Ontario, like healthcare. Like, so he's closed down to the media, the media in Ontario. I think that there's a narrative there too, that he's really just out there kind of pumping for his own job and not really looking to answer some of the tough questions that his campaign might want to hide him from. So we'll see.
I don't see that. Yeah, I don't see that in the least.
But I don't think people notice.
Listen, he's heading to Washington with a ton of business folks, with people who actually have skin in the game, who employ people in this province. I mean, all of that, I think, plays to the story that the Conservatives want and need to tell and have been telling.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Jordan, let's not jump ahead to the federal conversation yet, but relevant to the provincial thing. It is also the case that it's clear that the federal Liberal numbers are improving, and some of the antipathy toward the federal Liberal Party is dissipating. Mm-hmm. This has to be helping Crombie, doesn't it? Yeah,
well, for sure. And I think one of the things that Marit has had that has been so useful for her is that she is unencumbered by the Liberal baggage that Crombie has had. Mm. So and as we've talked about this a little bit before, is I think, a lot of progressive voters are always looking for a way to vote Liberal, a permission structure to vote Liberal. And Trudeau leaving and a sense of like momentum or change around that can provide that in some regions. So, yeah, I mean, I think that probably is a bit of a lift for Crombie outside of her control, but it doesn't come as a bad time for her. And for Marit, like, the challenge remains the same. She is good and people like her when they see her. But she has got to get noticed in all the noise, and that is it's a big uphill battle, and especially if the Liberals federally start to take up more oxygen with the leadership race.
Yeah, well, there's 10 days gone, Jordan, and there's not an iota of movement in her familiarity or favorability numbers.
It's such small beer. It's like what my mom says. When people sit down and get to know Scott, they really like him, but no one's taking the time to do that.
Well, I mean, I do actually, like, I think debates could be significant for that. Like, there are sometimes those moments in the campaign where you see somebody break through. Paid advertising has to be a big part of it too. So they need to take some risks on that in terms of moving that out the door early, even to create some sense of momentum. If you build it, they will come.
David,
Deb, and then our do-overs.
The Liberals and the New Democrats don't even have candidates in every riding. And this isn't hey, let's time our nomination meeting to create some buzz. They don't have candidates. I think the Liberals are close to a quarter of the places where they don't even have someone to put their name on the ballot. And we're 10 days in. We're more than a quarter of the way into this race. So, I mean, if you're not running a candidate, it's kind of hard to win, at least from my perspective.
Right. Going back to David's point about the federal Liberals and the shadow they cast. Wouldn't it be awesome if this week there was like a narcity story that had like a little sort of Spadina cafe that showed Justin Trudeau and Marit Stiles eating off the same plate, like date night, and it just puts Marit with Trudeau, and it'd be like, oh man, that would be a gift to the Crombie campaign. Come on, Justin, take one for the team. Quarter the NDP.
The Ontario Real Estate Association, or OREA, knows more and more families are finding the lack of housing supply plus prohibitive government costs in Ontario are pushing the dream of home ownership further out of reach. A recent poll done for OREA by Abacus Data found that although 7 in 10 non-homeowners say they still dream of buying a home, nearly half have either given up believing they will ever own a home or are pessimistic about the possibility. That's why this week, OREA released their Ontario election platform titled A Home for Everyone 2025, putting forward pro-growth, pro-ownership, pro-affordability housing policies that will ensure future generations continue to have a shot at owning a home. From ending exclusionary zoning to tackling landlord and tenant board reform, OREA is proposing 10 bold actions to increase housing affordability and consumer protections in Ontario. Over the coming weeks, you'll be hearing more on how decision makers can implement pro-home ownership policies to end the housing affordability crisis. But for now, you can read OREA's full election platform at orea.com/platform. Jordan, you reminded me of our new segment Do-Over because it sounded like you were offering one to the NDP. So maybe I'll ask you to lead off.
Yeah, well, I guess yes, that I am. I mean, I had others, but this is as good a one as any. Yeah, I do think it's time to fabricate some momentum. It's time to use the advertising dollars earlier than you might otherwise to push out and create the sense that there's some energy behind Marit's campaign. Like, I think the tour is going very well. I think it's been really professional, and generally the message has been very good. But I think hewing closer to affordability issues, because that ground has actually a little bit been ceded by the Liberals, and Ford is out there talking tariffs. So take that lane. The rent announcement was good. Keep on that. Keep on those types of themes, tying it back to affordability. But you need to create some distance between you and the Liberals. And if you can't get movement out of the earned media environment, which is going to be really tough, you got to pay your way in. And I think now is the moment to do it.
All right. Deb?
You know, we talked about this a little bit yesterday. Scott's going to tell me I'm just repeating everything day after day after day. And in that sense, by the way, I haven't said Jagmeet Singh today. So I do need to say that just to throw it out there. But I do think that it's not the smartest thing to annoy the media to such a degree where you're not taking actual questions from them. And I know this is a tough one when you're the front runner, but I do think they can loosen things up a little bit when it comes to media access. In particular, when he's going to continue, as he should, to do American media, which gives him a lot of play back here. So I think just adjust a little bit, guys, to make the media a little less grumpy.
All right. Scott?
I think this is a cheat, but my do-over is looking at yesterday's event that looked a little crisper, that actually broke through on healthcare. I would say do over what you did the week before. No message of the day. Liberal campaign, drop message of the day. Just literally telegraph there's a message of the week, right? Like just every day, meet with somebody who's had a horrific experience. So it's not you just repeating your 4-point plan. Meet with somebody who's had a horrific experience with the healthcare system, pound away on that, borrow the millions of stories of frustration and inaction that have occurred across the province when it comes to trying to find a family doctor, and ride it every day. So no message of the day, no ODSB, no rent control today, no, oh, here we are with a new deal for Mississauga and Brampton. Fuck all that, right? Try to muscle as best you can. Your paid media, your earned media, your message of the day becomes a message of the week, and just stick to it. So dump all that other stuff, all those other things.
Yep. All right. My do-over goes out to the Liberals also, obviously. And what I would say is, you know how much I love the healthcare message, and you know how powerful I think it is. But I think you're slightly wide of the bullseye on it. Family docs is a good issue, and it's a great commitment to make. And far too many people don't have a family doctor, but most people do have a family doctor. And they're not as concerned about family docs. the availability of family docs. What everybody in Ontario is wild about is wait times for surgeries, which is on your bus, and ERs. Everybody knows that if they have to go to the ER, it's going to be a nightmare. Wait times in ERs is the number one pressure point on access to the healthcare system in public opinion terms. And I would start to press that button.
My buddy's wife was on medication for 3 months. She goes off medication. All of her symptoms come back. She goes to the specialist, not the GP, the specialist. The specialist says, well, if it doesn't get better by tomorrow, go to Emerge. The specialist tells her to go to Emerge. She goes to Emerge. Guess how long she was in Emerge? 12 and a half hours. 12 and a half hours. When they arrived, it said 4.5 hours on the board, and they just sat there and watched like time trickle by at a glacial pace. I would just try to.
Well, she could have lived in. She could have lived in a town. She could have lived in a town where the ER is closed for the week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually it's interesting because I think there's a lot of vulnerability on ER closures in rural areas. Like, so this is an issue that really transcends different regions of the province. And actually, you've heard the NDP talking about it in rural areas, in particular in the north, and it moves people for sure. Like, actually, we saw a poll out yesterday in Sault Ste. Marie, where the Liberals don't have a candidate yet, and the PC incumbent has retired, that the NDP is closing in on the PCs there, strictly on the issue of healthcare access.
Well, if Marit wasn't sitting around watching Hugh Grant rom-coms with Justin Trudeau, maybe she would be on this issue. I'm not letting this thing go.
Right. Missed your calling, Scott.
All right. We got a few minutes left. Let's take a quick zag over to the federal scene. Scott, let's start with you. It is clear that something is moving now. It's not the massive move yet that Frank Graves forecast a week or so ago. But nonetheless, everybody is now finding that the race is tightening between the Liberals and the Conservatives. Everybody is now finding that Carney is the leading Liberal candidate. And everybody, and Leger in particular, is finding enthusiasm in Quebec. Most interesting to me, though, is both Leger in Quebec and Nanos nationally found that people have significantly more people have confidence in Carney to manage the trade relationship with Trump than Poilievre. And to me, that says, given the fact that fewer than 30% of people have a real favorable opinion of Mark Carney right now, that this says more about Poilievre than it does about Carney at this point. And the last thing I'm going to throw into this mix is that the polls are also showing that when the Liberals gain under Carney, they gain from the left-wing parties, the NDP in English Canada and the Bloc in Quebec, more than they gain from the Conservatives. So I throw all that melange of polling together, and Scott, say something.
Well, two things are about to happen, and Mark Carney is going to have to completely shift his focus. We talked about whether maybe they were moving their focus from Liberal leadership to general election, and now that's going to intensify now, because I think Jenny's going to bring the guns. So to your point, I agree with you. This tells us more about where Canadians are at and what they think and expect from Poilievre than it does about Carney. So I assume that they are not going to wait to an election campaign or to March 9th when the leadership is crowned. I assume that Jenny is going to take large amounts of money from her bank account and pound it with negative advertising on Carney. And I think we're going to see a lot more pointed effort on Poilievre to associate himself in ways that work from their perspective on the border on Trump. And so if you're the Carney campaign, you're going to have to think about what comes next. You're going to have to think about how you sustain this message. And I continue to believe there is still room, particularly when you think about that left dynamic that you're talking about, particularly when you think about Quebec and the undercurrent of anti-Americanism that's walking hand in hand with Buy Canadian. I think there's still room for Carney because he is the gray businessman. He is the gray financer. He is the gray banker. I think there's room for him to hit harder on the anti-Donald Trump stuff and soak up some love. So I'd add a couple of crowd-pleasing beat lines on the anti-Trump stuff there, because you're not going to see a ton of that from Poilievre. I think it's a space he can own.
Jordan, what do you think's going on?
I mean, I feel nervous looking at those numbers for sure, but I also think, I want to see those numbers once Jenny's done with Carney, right? Like there's I think, as you say, it's far less about Carney and any inherent positives that he's bringing to the role than it is reflecting a discomfort with a lot of voters in the idea of Poilievre leading the negotiations with Trump. And I think that there's likely a lot of good reasons and a lot of brand reasons for that. I do think that Carney's campaign is opening a lot of flanks on the left. You know, we saw him out this week confirming that he's going away from things like the capital gains tax increase. So there's a lot for the NDP to scoop up on the other side and come at him with. But really, he's pretty untested in terms of public opinion, more broadly outside the context of the Liberal leadership race. So I wouldn't panic yet. I think that there's a lot to work with there. And I think that that's going to look different once we've seen some rounds of negative advertising coming from the Conservatives. It is definitely interesting to see how quickly the Conservatives have moved in response to these changes, because I think that we're not seeing the Frank Graves, like, it's not a big realignment. It is really like, it's just the ground shifting, right? And so just as a point of craft, I think that the fact that you're seeing such significant realignments coming from the Conservatives so early on is actually, like, it's also a testament to they're not just sitting there, they're doing something, right? And I think that that's a pretty well-run machine there. So even though Poilievre is coming in, I think, with some challenges on this file, on the Trump file, and it's going to be hard for him to own that because of all the reasons we've talked about before within his own vote coalition, I think they're doing a pretty good job of setting him up as favorably as possible.
Yeah. And
Listen,
Deb, what do you make of all of it?
As the easiest target, and I don't know whether I agree with Scott that the ads will come before March 9th or on March 9th or on March 10th, but it is such an easy target to go after Carney. I mean, his life has not been the life of most Canadians, and I think that is just so easy to pummel him. The flip-flops, unbelievable. Now, that's the case with pretty much every Liberal candidate vying to be their leader.
Poilievre's life has not been the life of most Canadians either.
Yeah, but look at it, right?
You don't have
Young
a cook in a
kids.
government paid mansion?
I am
Young
pleased to be here at
kids.
Model UN, where I will fight for the closure of all things generous.
All right. Well, the four of us can't exactly say our lives are exactly like other Canadians either, right? But no, come on. I mean, it is so easy to go after Carney, and they will, because they are, to Jordan's point, a really effective campaign and a great team, and they will be ready, and they're probably salivating over their opportunity to go whenever that comes, either before March 9th or after. The other thing I want to say is that, Carney is not tested, and that's unfortunate. We've talked about it with Marit. We've talked about it with Bonnie. It is the life of a politician once you make that decision, which he has. But not only is he not tested in a national campaign, he's never run and won his seat. And even that is a battleground that is a little bit of experience to actually take on a national campaign. I think it's going to be a problem for him completely, and that's good news for Conservatives.
I mean,
Okay, but let's not
he'll
talk about-
have an easier time of it than Bonnie currently is. seat-wise.
So Deb, let's leave Carney aside for a second, because I think we're all agreed that not enough Canadians know enough about him yet for anything to be settled in terms of opinion about him.
Right.
But so if you're the Conservatives in the war room, you're sitting around, you're going, okay, so we have to go after Carney, and we'll go after Carney, and here's how we'll go after Carney, and it's all obvious, the things we're going to say. But are you also saying to yourself, why is it at this point that people are so anxious to choose somebody other than Pierre as their standard bearer against Trump? Why? Take the Nanos poll today. Why are so many people who are voting for Poilievre, who are voting Conservative, don't think he's the right person to deal with Trump?
So
Do they have to think about that and worry about that?
I would say that his strength in message, his one track on whichever topic he's on of his very narrow set of messages is also his weakness, because it does turn people off. The alliteration, which we talk about so much, it penetrates. Good. That's a great thing. But it also offends a lot of people. It's like, why do you talk like that? And so
Axe attacks.
Yeah,
Axe attacks, build the houses.
But he is like the guy you avoid at
kiss
the
the
cocktail
girls,
party.
make them cry.
Oh my God.
So that'd be
Not
it,
this one
Scott.
again.
Yeah. But it's a double-edged sword.
Right.
And that is part of the challenge, I think, for him, because we, as Scott just did, not just political watchers, most people who have heard anything and have any awareness of federal politics know what his mantras are. But it is also a little grating for some people.
Scott, they've got more money than God. I would also be preparing a positive campaign about Poilievre.
I think
They've obviously got some brand work to shore up.
Well, and you think about
and they've done that,
how
right?
many
They have done
dividends
some.
their last positive campaign in the summer 2023 paid off. Like that was really where you saw them
Right.
take off.
Hmm.
And
why wouldn't you show? Sorry.
I was going to say, so which to me always makes it's so interesting because after investing like more than $3 million in that campaign and seeing such success, they've still made choices that play into some of the more negative aspects of his personality. So there's like a clear push-pull within the campaign on that.
I was just going to say he's had some decent clip lines on Trump. Like he's been smart in what he's had to say. There hasn't been any kind of like wishy-washiness, and so I would take some of those clips and put them into an ad, and so that you see him being forceful on this issue and saying Trump can go fly a kite. But yeah, I'd go after Carney and try to bomb that bridge.
All right, blessing or curse? Let's wrap it up. Who's first today?
I'll go.
Okay,
I've got a
All right,
blessing for Marit Stiles.
Lord love you.
She's actually been unwell and has continued on, and so I send out a blessing. I can't imagine being in front of the cameras, riding the bus, being away from home, and having some sort of whatever she's got going on. So I send her my blessing.
Here, here.
There you go. Jordan?
To play it forward, I have a blessing for the Ford campaign. So I think over the last week, they have done a really good job of rolling out their union endorsements. So they, not to overstate it because it's
No kidding. They got the pipe fitters.
It's a subset of private sector
My uncle used
unions
to tell a
within
joke about
Ontario.
pipe
So
fitters,
not to overstate the degree of their union support. But what they did, I think it's so smart. Rather than dumping them all in one day, they're just sprinkling them all across the province. They're doing, a few locals a day, and they're getting the visuals. He's there with the uniform hoodie. So I thought that was really very well done because it really creates a perception of much larger labor union endorsement than is actually there. And actually, there's been some thoughtful media coverage of that. There was a really good TVO discussion for anybody who wants to like nerd out on that dynamic in the Ontario campaign.
They've also got shitloads of volunteers as a result of all these union endorsements. The private sector guys. I think the firefighters put in more signs than Fred Hahn's CUPE people do.
No comment.
Yeah, most of Fred's signs were, down with Israel, anti-Semitic garbage. My blessing, I'm sending out two quick blessings, both dealing with the federal leadership and the federal Liberal Party. First, the Race to Replace, our sister podcast, focusing on the Liberal leadership. They spent all their time predicting what would the numbers be, and they came in and expert people who are close to things. They were all saying, our buddies, Tyler and Dan, and now they're all going, well, 200, 180, 240,000, came in at 400,000. And I'm telling you, I find it peculiar that the number's 400,000.
Ruby Dalla is going to kick ass in the election. I'm fucking telling you.
That's exactly what I'm worried about. Something odd is going on. I find it bizarre that no one is commenting on this. We've had days now, this number being out there, and it's like, well,
it's almost
I'm
like
curious.
This process was ripe for foreign interference, Scott.
Like our pals on another podcast are like, wow, it shows that the prime minister is really connecting with Canadians when it comes to Trump. Bullshit, it says that. It tells me that somebody sold a fuckload of memberships.
Gave away
that we didn't expect. And so what's going on? Who owns those? What is it? Are they phony? Are they real? Is it going to show up in all in one riding or whatever? But there's a curious thing that needs to be asked and examined there. And so we'll see when the party, rationalizes all the numbers and stuff. But there's something up there. And,
it reminds me a bit of the
I don't
BC
like it when I don't know
leadership
something.
race. When they're like, oh no, this is too many members.
my second quick blessing is that today I gave money away, and I gave money away because today's the deadline. You have to put another 125 grand on the table if you're a Liberal leadership candidate. And, we know that Carney's going to do it. We know that Freeland's going to do it. Karina Gold's campaign was a little hesitant. So I went and gave money to Karina Gold, went and gave the limit that I could. You can donate to more than one leadership candidate, right? And I'm
You're a good egg, Scott.
I want Carney to win, but I was like I want Karina Gold to stay in the race. I think, it's good to have somebody who's 37, who's kicking around, trying to knock away at people. More candidates is better if they're decent, and she's decent. So if other people are online this morning, go give money, keep Karina in the race.
Scott.
Yeah.
You're too old to be playing Karina Gould futures. By the
I'm not
time
playing
she's
with
the
futures.
leader,
I'm
you're
just-
not going to be looking for influence.
No, don't get
You're
me
not
wrong.
going to want. You're going to be irrelevant.
No. My
Yeah.
next choice is the progeny of Marit Stiles and Justin Trudeau. It's going to be whatever which child they produce. But I just think it's good to have a healthy race.
All right, liberals who are listening, when it doesn't end well for Gould, you know where to find us, okay?
My blessing goes out to the NDP campaign and Marit Stiles, which is, I think the rent control announcement was the most impactful announcement of the day yesterday. And I think that if you were asking me what are the 3 or 4 most impactful things a political party can say about affordability, I would say rent control. So good day yesterday for them. And a smart announcement. Thank you all for being here. We're going to take a break for the weekend, but we'll be back on Monday. Deb Hutton, Jordan Leichnitz, Scott Reid, and me cursing and swearing about politics. See you then. In the meantime, thank you to Aurea for sponsoring this podcast, and thank you to our polling sponsor, Enbridge, for their sponsorship of Relay Research's polling. See you Monday morning. Have a good weekend.